Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast with the next story on deck for us. The rule changes that were proposed recently in the offseason, now with the start of the new league year officially yesterday. Everyone saw the deals that were made official, all the trades, the free agent signings that moved past the tampering phase. Now everything's technically official. All the releases, the trades, and all that stuff that I mentioned. There was also talks about some rule changes, some proposals from certain teams to make changes to certain rules. The ones that popped up the most were onside kicks, challenges, the trade deadlines, all those things. I thought some of those were most interesting from a handful of teams that I was going to bring up on this show. And some of the more significant ones in the mind of the NFL offices and the ones that were deemed more significant and critical, those were going to be addressed by proposals from the competition committee later on, I'm assuming. So the ones that I'm going to present right now are ones that are considered a bit more, minor, a bit looser to talk about from all the other teams to just suggest and give their 2 cents on it. Whereas the drop hip tackle could be more of a critical one. That'll be addressed by the competition committee as an example. So, and before I go into these rules, I will say if any of these rules do make it into a decision decision-making process, it needs to be approved by 24 out of the 32 owners to be actually passed as it being an official rule. So, without further ado, I'm going to get into some of them. The first one that was brought up a lot and that was pretty specific was the one change proposed by the Eagles. It said that, or they wanted a change to the onside kick because of, if you're being honest, I don't think anybody watching this show, or definitely I couldn't remember the last time an onside kick was recovered by the kicking team. It always is the last gasp chance to try and get the ball back. But the percentage of recovering it is so low that, if you do see it in a game, you're almost 90% of the time, 95% of the time, nobody believes it's going to happen, or people might think it could happen, but it's not really executed right. It has to be so perfect, and it has to bounce so perfectly that the other team just doesn't recover it cleanly, and then you get only a chance to tie the game, win the game if you do get it. So that doesn't really work, or it hasn't worked, at least in my opinion. So the Eagles proposed that instead of an onside kick, the traditional one, that they would permit a team that's trying to tie the game, win the game, to maintain possession after they score a touchdown or a field goal. And if it converts a 4th and 20 offensive play from their own 20, then they get a chance to either continue that drive and just keep going, basically. And that is obviously instead of doing the regular onside kick. And just to throw out a fact out there about the statistics around the onside kick, just last year, only 2 out of 41 attempted onside kicks were recovered. So, very low number, like I mentioned. Low probability that anyone is going to continue that excitement, which I think is the biggest part, because you want to, with the NFL, with these close games, it almost feels like you don't want it to end. You want it to keep going. You want to see all the twists and turns and all the emotion to keep going. With the onside kick, it almost ruins it because, they're about to kick an onside kick. Let's see if they get it, but nobody ever really executes it right, or something goes wrong. Somebody touches it early, or the kick's just not good at all. So they want to make a change to it, and this proposal by the Eagles, I think, is very interesting. It's definitely very different than what I've seen before with any onside kick, and I think I like the idea, but it might be a bit too different for the NFL because, converting a 4th and 20 from your own 20, I see what they're trying to do there and make it still low odds to convert it. You still have to execute it almost as perfect as an onside kick. Realistically, converting a 4th and 20 is almost impossible. Makes it very easy for the defense, but with it being a 4th and 20 from their own 20, I think it's an idea that you can throw out there and have people consider it because it doesn't favor the offense too much. Everyone knows that follows the NFL. That's the way the league is going. And I think this is still very low odds that if you do add it in there, it adds a little bit more excitement. But on the contrary, the bad part about this is it could add more stoppages to the game and more decision making that's very subjective a lot. Because say you go for the 4th and 20, you have a chance to continue that drive, you throw it deep down the field, and there's a possible pass interference, illegal touching, offensive pass interference, or something like that. You have to stop the game even further. It's already at the end, but now you're elongating it a lot more because the refs have to go to the replay booth. Do you allow the team that's going for it to have a challenge at that situation? Because it's such a rare opportunity, do you allow another challenge, or does everything have to be from the replay booth? And if it does, teams are going to be mad if the replay booth doesn't try to review it. There's going to be more scrutiny, more heat on the officials to make the right call, especially on a 4th and 20. Some people think it's an obvious call. Some people might not like their decision. So from that part, I think that's something the NFL doesn't really want to do. And this is almost too wild of idea from the Eagles. It's an exciting one if you think about all the positives, but I think it's too much for the officials to get it right. A potential for penalties and all that stuff to go wrong. There's more wrong than there is right in this idea, but I do like them trying to change the onside kick to something different. I think that has to change because nobody really has a chance with it anymore, and you kind of know how games are going to end once someone lines up in the onside kick formation anyway. So to add more excitement, they need to change it, but this one might have gone a little bit too far past the line of reason for the NFL. But moving on to the next one, it was a proposal from the Colts, and this one's a bit more simple, a bit more reasonable. It was that they would allow the coaches to challenge any foul that's been called on the field, subjective ones too, a pass interference, stuff like that. I know the NFL only allows you to challenge certain rules, and other ones, you can't challenge, or I think the NBA as well. There's some things that, if the ref calls it one way, like if they call a foul, and you can challenge that foul call, but if they might have called something else, you can't challenge them to look at something that they didn't call per se. So in the NFL, if you think a guy might have had pass interference and you challenge the call of pass interference, I don't think you can challenge, once you look at the replay, you can't be like, he was actually holding. They're looking at pass interference, illegal touching or something like that. If you see it on the board and you realize, it wasn't actually this that I'm challenging, it's something else that is now more clear because of replay, I don't think you can do that. The Colts saying they want to challenge everything, I think it should be like that anyway, that you should be able to challenge all the calls already. But again, it falls onto this, you get into this gray area, this delicate area where if you want to challenge subjective calls as well, you can't really get into who's right or wrong because it's subjective. So you could look at it one way, another person could really be all in on, you're wrong, it's this way actually. The subjective ones, is there really a right answer to a subjective call on that day? A lot of calls are how the referee views it, so you have to put your trust in the ref to make the right call, or what he believes is the right call. I know there's rules and language that classifies what is and what isn't a foul, but at the end of the day, the ref might see it one way and they'll call it that way. So I think adding on that you should be able to challenge all the subjective ones as well. Again, just like the Eagles one, I think it creates too much more added pressure on the refs to make a good call, or what is deemed a good call. And it'll just add more confusion, more criticism, more bad light on the NFL for having refs that are blind or can't really make the right call. I don't think that's something that the league really wants to entertain. There's more wrong than there is right with that. It's a decent idea, but I think they'll just have trouble deciding the language, the kind of words to use to really decide what should be challenged and what shouldn't be a foul. They already have trouble doing that as it stands right now. I think this just opens it up to a wider range of classifications, generalizations with rules and stuff like that. So again, it's good in principle, but thinking about it more and more, there might be more wrongs than right with this Colts proposal. Another one by the Detroit Lions was that they would allow the coaches to get a third challenge if one of their first two are successful rather than if both are. Currently, I think it could be one or two. I'm blanking on that. I'm just having a clouded thought right now about if they get one challenge. I'm pretty sure they just get one challenge, and if they get it right, they get another one because they got it right. So in saying that, with the Lions and proposing that, I think 3 might be too much. I think you could get 2, and then if you get one or the other one right, I think that should be and would be more fair for the NFL and the way things are called that way. Making it 3, I think, might be a bit too much just because it adds more stoppages, more reviews, and a lot of fans already complain about that enough. The NFL game is usually around 3.5, 4 hours anyway. I think it just could make it a lot longer, even if, there's a lot of wrong calls. It's another one where, you might be asking for too much at that point to get 3 challenges if one of the first 2 are right, because you're going to see a lot of coaches really trying to abuse that and really push it for one of them to be right. And I think for a ref to say a coach is wrong 3 times on a challenge, it'll add just too much more argument, dispute, too much extra stuff that just takes away from the game already than it already does. So another good idea, but I just think it's a bit too far out there. The last one I wanted to talk about was proposed by the Steelers, and they were the only team to propose that the trade deadline be moved only 1 week back. There were 6 other teams, the Eagles, the Browns, and the 49ers among the 3 others that said it should be moved back to week 10. And I actually said this before when this was more of a talking point, when I had it as a segment on a show. I think week 9 is more reasonable. A lot of times with these rule changes, I think the league just declines them, to be quite honest, because they'll always find something wrong with it. I think only pushing it back 1 week, they'll see it as, all right, they're trying to make a compromise there. Everyone or the majority want to be pushed back 2 weeks. I think the league will not like that too much, won't be open to accepting that. By the Steelers proposing it to be moved back 1 week, it's a bit of give and take. They don't want to be too extreme with it, and the league really isn't changing too much. 1 week is a lot for these players and these front offices, quite honestly, when they're trying to make a trade or they're trying to evaluate something. Even having those extra 7 days, I think, will make a difference, rather than having 2 more weeks, and then the topic around tanking becomes the main issue, or just teams really not trying to win and stuff like that, trading away all their players because they don't see that they have a chance to move on to the playoffs. With 1 week extra, pushing the trade deadline back, I don't think it makes much of a difference. So, in all honesty, I think this one's the most likely to happen, trade deadline change. I thought that was the one that's more likely to happen anyway, but week 9 seems like the more reasonable one to me. The one I liked the most was the Eagles one, but I think it is, from a fan perspective, I think it's great, but from executive office position, I think they'll find something wrong with it and will try to alter it too much. And then by that point, is it really a change? So I think the Steelers are the ones to most likely get it done. But we'll see where those changes end up. There's going to be, I'm sure, a lot more proposals from other teams, but those are the ones that I found to be the ones most interesting and the ones that I would like to see happen more often than not. I would push back on the trade deadline, and the onside kick has to be the one, for me, that has to change in some aspect. But moving on now with the show, I will send it to another quick break, and on the other side of it, I'll have the story on Dak Prescott's brother and what he said in regards to the Eagles front office and what the signing of Calvin Ridley means for the Tennessee Titans and their new offense that they're trying to build under their new head coach, Brian Callahan. It's all exciting for the Tennessee Titans, so you don't want to miss that. That's all coming up right after this break.